I believe that everybody has a story, and I'm fascinated to hear them. So come with me as we take a walk down Fascination Street.
The Barstar Podcast is a show that aims for something a little different. It's hosted by a drummer who thinks he's a musician. But let's be honest, I know and you know that drummers are not musicians, right? Or are they? Hang on a second, who wrote this crap? This is garbage. Nobody's gonna listen to a show put on by somebody they haven't heard of. Stupid. Crap.
You can get the show on Podbean, which is my home. You can get it on iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify. You can get it on my YouTube channel, Castbox, Stitcher, and I think there's a couple other places that I don't even know that I'm on, but I'm apparently on. And barstarpodcast.com. Anyway, trying to make this thing as big as possible. Thanks for listening. Thanks for hanging out.
From now until December 31st, 2018, the James Beard Foundation is accepting nominations for the 2019 James Beard Awards. And I invite all of you to join me in nominating Chef Stephen McHugh from Cured in San Antonio, Texas, for the 2019 James Beard Award for Best Chef Southwest. I've made it easy to do this, guys. If you go to FascinationStreetPod.com and look to the right of the page, there will be a photo of Chef Stephen McHugh. When you click on that photo, it will take you to the 2019 James Beard Award page. You will need to create an account, but that'll only take about 60 seconds and they don't ask for much. It's really just a name and password kind of a thing. Once you've created an account, it will take you to the nominations page. From there, you'll click on the 2019 Restaurant and Chef Awards, and then complete the submission form, making sure to select Best Chef Southwest as the category. It's that easy, guys. All it takes is 5 minutes of your time, and I would greatly appreciate it. So thank you in advance, and now let's get to this week's episode. Alright guys, this episode is with Steve from Thinking Sideways podcast. Thinking Sideways is one of the most popular true crime podcasts out there. And in this episode, we talk about how Steve, Joe, and Devin met, as well as what made them decide to do a podcast and why it was about true crime and unsolved mysteries. We also talk about all of the odd coincidences between Steve from Thinking Sideways and Steve from Fascination Street podcast, which are considerable. Everything from the banks we worked at to how and why we got into podcasting and who we started off listening to. We talk about how they started Thinking Sideways podcast, how they chose their stories and how they divided up their roles, and we talk about why the show ended. So as you're listening to this episode, keep this question in mind. Is Steve from Thinking Sideways and Steve from Fascination Street the same person? Enjoy, guys. This is Steve from Thinking Sideways.
Yeah, talk to me, yeah.
This episode of Thinking Sideways is not brought to you by Barbie, leaving Ken for G.I. Joe.
Thinking Sideways.
All right, welcome, Steve from Thinking Sideways podcast. Thank you for taking the time to hang out with us on Fascination Street. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing good, Steve. How about yourself?
I cannot complain. It is a relatively cool day here in South Texas in August, meaning that it only, I think, got to 98 today. So it's a good day, man.
You poor bastard.
Yes. A lot of indoor stuff going on today. Just editing podcasts and interviewing fine folks like yourself.
Well, you know, it's what you do when it's super hot out, right?
That is the truth. That's why there's indoor kids and outdoor kids. All right, Steve, from Thinking Sideways podcast, let's get to know you a little bit better. First of all, are you calling from a secret bunker under Cheyenne Mountain?
Not under Cheyenne Mountain. I can neither confirm nor deny my location.
Sweet. Let's just agree to disagree that you're probably somewhere in the Pacific Northwest.
That sounds like a good agreement.
Sweet. All right. Now, can you tell us a little bit about how you grew up or where you grew up?
Oh, yeah, sure. I'm originally from the East Coast, but I'm one of those weird Army brats. I moved all over the states when I was a kid. So I think at last count, I've lived in like 10 or 12 different states over the course of my life. And most of that was done while I was a kid. But I ended up settling in Southern Oregon. That's where my family kind of settled down, and grew up in a little town like 100 miles north of the California border, which it's kind of in the boonies. There's not a whole lot to do there. It's really not all that exciting of a story.
That sounds awesome. So in any of those Army brat moves, were you ever in San Antonio, Texas?
I was not.
Wow.
I was in Florida and Georgia, and God, it feels like there was one other state in that region, but I don't think we were in Texas.
That is amazing, because I think for a bunch of decades, I believe this is correct, all basic training for all the military came through San Antonio.
Well, my dad was already through basic training before I came along, so
Aha.
dodge that bullet.
Yes, you did not have to slum it down here with all the hot and the sweat and the gross and the humid. It's gross, man. Don't come here.
Oh, listen, I spent a while in the Mojave Desert. I think I got an idea of what you're dealing with.
Oh, man, that's not fair. You just out-sweated me on the phone.
So this is a funny story, but my dad had moved down to the Mojave. That's where he was stationed. I can't remember what base it was anymore. And my mom was like, well, you want to go stay with your dad for the summer? Of course, being, 12, of course, it's got to be awesome. And then lo and behold, it's in this teeny tiny town with nothing to do, and it's 1,000,000 degrees outside. And my dad hands me my bicycle and says, go somewhere. But Dad, it's like 100 degrees. I don't care. Just go somewhere.
Yeah, and you're like in the Mojave Desert, so if you fall down, you're just going to land on glass because the sand is just all turned to glass already.
Yeah, it's super duper hot. And there's some crazy plant out there that is just out to pop bicycle tires. It used to throw thorns at me constantly. It was always asking for money to get new bicycle tubes.
That's crazy. No, I mean, that's crazy that you didn't have a paper route or something to buy your own damn bicycle tubes.
Yeah, no, I'm kind of glad I didn't have to do that.
So I know that a lot of your ethos, if you will, is shrouded in secrecy, but can you tell us what you do for a living or what you did for a living?
Yeah. So I am a graphic designer. I'm kind of a jack of all trades when it comes to graphic design. So I do print design, and then I do digital design work. And for a good number of years now, I've been working for a technology company here in Portland, doing that every day. I live in a cubicle farm, just like the rest of the world.
Oh, sweet. I used to live in a cubicle farm when I worked in banks, but thank goodness all of the banks failed over and over and over again a few years ago, and I got laid off, I think 3 times in 1 year from 3 different banks.
Wow.
So I decided to because I had a side business I was doing on the weekends and holidays where I would washing windows for, businesses, but mostly homes. And so I just decided to take that full time, and I was like, these banks are going to just keep laying me off, but I'll never lay me off, so I'm hired.
Were you working in a branch?
I was working in a giant mortgage loan center, so
okay.
I would go to work with 5,000 people.
I understand. I used to work for Wells Fargo for many, many years in a giant building that was nothing but people pushing paper all day long.
Wells Fargo was 3 of the banks that I got let go from.
Nice. Very nice.
I started working for a company called World Savings and Loan, based out of California, I think. And then they got bought by Wachovia. And then Wachovia let me go and then rehired me. And then they got bought by Wells Fargo. And then they let me go and rehired me. And then they let me go. And then USAA let me go. How many times is that? Who cares? Lots of fun. So now I don't do that.
Good call. Good old Wells Fargo.
Yeah, good old Wells Fargo. I don't think they got fined enough, if you ask me. But, so you do graphic design, and you're just hanging out, minding your own business in Portland area. All of a sudden, podcasting happens. Tell me when you first listened to your very first podcast.
Oh, wow. I think I started listening, ironically enough, podcasts when I was working at the bank. You know, I was pushing paper all day and typing, doing data entry kind of stuff, and was bored out of my mind. It used to be what I referred to as the crap job. And I remember somebody saying one day that I was like, how do you listen to music all day? Don't you go crazy? And they said, well, no, I'm listening to a podcast and blah. And I was like, oh, what is that? So that had to have been... I would say it was like 2005, 2006-ish. Oh, God, no, maybe a little later than that, but right in that area.
All right, now we're going to have a problem. So, my name is Steve. What's your name?
It's Steve.
I used to work at Wells Fargo. Where did you used to work?
I used to work at Wells Fargo.
The way that I got into podcasting was I was bored out of my mind working in a cubicle at Wells Fargo. And... you can only listen to like the same 8 or 9 songs because the radio sucks. So you can only listen to like the same 8 or 9 songs so many times before you want to jump out a window.
Uh-huh.
And then a friend of mine was like, well, you should listen to a podcast. And I was like, what's a podcast?
This is creepy.
So Thinking Sideways and Fascination Street are the same. No, they're not. That's all that other stuff is where the similarities stop. Let's assume. We
owe all of our beginnings to the Wells Fargo.
You know, that's true. And I think that...
No, we don't.
For real, I think that creativity has always owed a debt of gratitude to sheer boredom.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
You know, people got bored with that weird stick and hoop game from the 20s, and then they invented, like, I don't know, baseball or hockey or anything else. Okay, so all the little kids that are listening right now, you know, like the 30-year-olds and under, they don't know what that stick and the hoop thing I'm talking about is. Google it. Google them shit. Y'all will be seriously disappointed.
I think the same thing. That might be where the whole game with the Aztecs came from. The one where they would, use somebody's head as a soccer ball. That might be the same thing. It was like, this game is really boring. I don't like Ted. What if we take Ted's head and we use it as the ball?
I love that you made sure to reference the Aztecs, but then you called him Ted, as if there was any Aztecs named Ted. It was like Komodo or something.
In my world, there are two names that you get when you're kind of the dummy of the bunch, and that's Ted and Daryl.
Oh, man, I got so scared. I thought you were going to say Steve.
No. Steves are geniuses.
You don't have to tell me, man.
Cream of the crop.
My dad's name is Steve, my name is Steve, my brother's name is Steve, and my son is named Steve. So we are well versed in the Steve tradition.
That has got to be getting your mail so confusing.
It does. It absolutely 100% does.
I can only imagine the awkward conversations.
Oh, it's terrible.
So I got I got this thing from the doctor. What have you been doing?
Right. Hey, I got this nondescript magazine wrapped in brown paper. Sorry, kids. So a magazine used to be a publication. Okay, Google that shit too.
There we go.
So you got into podcasting and you're listening to podcasts, and are you using iTunes or Podcast Pickle, or like what are you using?
I've been on a Mac forever, so I had iTunes.
There's over 1 million podcasts on iTunes, so that's I don't think podcasting would be anything if Steve Jobs didn't embrace it. So
no.
Tip of the hat to that guy.
I gotta tell you, I actually am surprised that podcasting has survived as well as it has, seeing as, Apple is the medium, at least for a great number of years, that most people got it through. But Apple provided podcasters with about zero support. So to me, it's amazing that it ever grew as big as it did because they were not fostering it.
They were literally just a place to hold it. Even now, like, I don't know about your show, but for my show, when I go to the iTunes analytics or whatever, there's almost nothing there.
Yeah.
And the stuff that is there is wildly incorrect. So,
yeah.
I mean, like, I think I was doing it for probably 6 or 7 months the first time I looked at, I guess, like, whatever they think my download numbers are. And I was telling my wife that I was going to quit because my download numbers are so low. And she looked at them and she goes, hold on a second. You personally know more people than that are listening. She's like, there's more people living in this house listening to this than they say. So just ignore them and keep going.
Yeah, they created a monster and they really didn't want anything to do with the monster.
That is the truth. What genre were you, like when you first started, were you surfing all over the place or did you find a particular genre and stay there?
I initially was going into, I used to listen to the comedy genre a lot just because, my day job was just, ugh. And so it was just something to make me laugh and enjoy the day. And then over time, it evolved to, take in more how stuff works and history kind of stuff. And, it eventually evolved, but it totally was comedy at the beginning because it was the only thing to keep me sane.
That makes sense. When I got into it, I found narrative fiction. And so what it was a bunch of authors who had written books, but have, for whatever reason, been unable to get representation and publishing. Mm-hmm. They all basically banded together and started releasing their content in episodic form for free as podcasts. And then, they would get followers. And there's a few that actually ended up getting so many followers based on that they ended up getting publishing deals because they had an audience to bring. Mm-hmm. And so that's really where I first got started. And I just fell in love with the medium so much. I love podcasting. Was that through Podiobooks? It was through Podiobooks. Yeah. One of the authors that I used to listen to on there that I still listen to this day is Scott Sigler. Aha! Scott, my boy. I love that guy. Okay, so Scott Sigler he's actually killed me in one of his books. Oh, are you one of the lucky ones that he is offed? Yes, I am. Oh, you dirty dog. I love him. He's my boy. Oh my gosh, that dude is the man. He was the first one that I found, and through him I found Seth Harwood. Yep. And Seth has put me in a couple of his books also. And Seth he was on like maybe the 4th or 5th episode of Fascination Street. Oh. I love Seth. He's a great dude. Oh, I haven't listened to your entire catalog. I downloaded it all, but I haven't gone through it yet. Well, take your time. You got nothing but time coming up. I appreciate that. That was really cool. Oh, yeah, absolutely. I enjoy the show. Do you ever listen to Paul E. Cooley? I've never even heard of Paul E. Cooley. Do you like horror fiction? Sure. You should give a couple of Paul's books a shot because he does that, that bit of the creepy crawly, get you a little spooked out, and then the monster jumps out and everything's okay. See, I like his work. Interesting. All right, cool. Well, thank you for that tip. I will look into Paul E. Cooley. Also, another one of the guys that I found on there was a guy named Phil Rossi? Rossi. Yeah, Phil Rossi. Yeah. And I just had him on my show a couple of weeks ago. And that dude, he is so badass. He also does music. And so he puts out music with his books, with his Oh, is that his music on the shows? Yes, that's him. He does it. I didn't know that. I was always like, how did he get the rights to this? Yeah, he does it. And here's an amazing thing. The day before I was scheduled to interview him, he sent me an email. It didn't say anything. It was just a file attachment, and it was from him. And I was like, this is weird. What is it? And I opened it up, and it is him doing like a sort of a Nine Inch Nails techno version of The Cure's Fascination Street. Oh, wow. And I got the chills, and I was like, this is the greatest thing ever. And then I probably listened to it 50 times before I ended up interviewing him the next day. But he did a very interesting thing. So the book that he's writing right now, I think he's doing it on Patreon. Well, I don't think. I know he's doing it on Patreon. Obviously, it takes place in the future. And so his character walks into like a techno club in the future and that song is playing. And so that's why he did it. But I'm 100% convinced that the reason that he picked that song is because he was going to do my show. So he actually got the music rights. Like, he got permission. He paid money for permission for the rights to do that to that song.
Wow.
So whatever he's doing it the right way so that he doesn't get in trouble, which I think is amazing. But when everybody hears that song, his version, oh my gosh, it blows. I can't, like, it's on repeat on the Sonos in my house almost all day long if I'm not recording something. I love that song so much.
Oh, that's great.
He's great. Anyway, more about you, Steve, from the Thinking Sideways podcast. Is it the or just thinking?
It's just thinking.
All right, Steve from Just Thinking. Just kidding. Just kidding. So you're listening to podcasts and you're bored out of your mind at the bank that shall not be named, which we'll name the heck out of it because what are they going to do to me?
It's buzz marketing.
They don't even know who you are, so they can't do anything to you.
Nope.
They're just going to sue every Steve that used to work there.
I love this idea.
So let's talk about Thinking Sideways. Whose idea was it? Well, first, who are your other two hosts, the co-hosts? First names only.
Yep. So my other co-hosts are Devin and Joe.
And how did you guys meet, if y'all can even remember?
Oh, yeah, no. So I have been friends with Joe for many, many, many years now. He and I used to be on a dragon boating team here in Portland. And so, you know, when you're on the team together, you hang out together, you end up going and drinking together because that's what you do. And Joe and I used to go to this little hole in the wall in our neighborhood and swill beer and shoot the breeze. And every now and again, we would start talking about weird stuff we read in the news, and then that would eventually, you know, evolve into talking about these weird mysteries we read about on the internet because the news got boring. This was kind of a regular occurrence, and one day we were sitting there, and some girl sat down next to me, and we were having this conversation talking about this, I don't even know what story. It was probably D.B. Cooper, because that is Joe's ultimate story. He never shuts up about it, but we were sitting there talking about it.
Maybe he is D.B. Cooper.
You know, I'm torn between Joe is D.B. Cooper and Joe is a serial killer with a freezer of bodies in his basement.
Interesting.
I'm really unsure. I just don't go in his basement to be safe.
Well, there's no rule that says he can't be both.
I like the way you think, sir. I'll let him know that he can be whoever he wants.
I'm trying to thinking sideways.
You're doing good. You're doing good. So anywho, so we were sitting there shooting the breeze about some story, and this girl who turned out to be Devin interjected into the conversation because she knew something about the story. And so we had a conversation, and then of course we all went our separate ways. And then it happened, you know, I don't know, a week or two later, we bumped into her again and she joined our conversation. And this happened a number of times. And we, of course, sitting around drinking, were convinced that we were freaking hilarious and people should hear us. And I said, well, I know a buddy who knows how to do audio. I'll just have him show me how to do it. We could record it and make a podcast. And they were like, sure, if you really want to do that. That in a nutshell is how it happened.
Wow. That was 5 years ago, right? Ish?
A little over that, but yeah.
So y'all would get together, would you say monthly?
At the bar?
No, when y'all decided to do the podcast, how often did y'all get together to do the show?
Oh, we recorded and released weekly.
Weekly?
Yeah.
For 5 years.
We never missed a week.
That is fantastic. For some reason, I felt like y'all maybe got together and gang tape a bunch of shows and then put them out weekly. I don't know why I thought that.
No, no, no. You're not the only one who's wondered that. And we had the same thought at one point. We thought, it would be so much easier if we just knocked a whole bunch out at once. And we might have been able to pull it off in the beginning, because when we first started, we were running like 20, 25 minutes an episode, but it didn't take very long for them to start getting longer and longer. And what happened is that we would finish one, and there were times where we'd say somebody's going to be out of town. So we'd get together on like a Saturday and say, let's just do 2 of them in a day. And that second episode would suck so bad because we were so wore out from going full tilt for the last hour on the last one that having to start over. It's like, oh boy. Okay, I hope we can make this work.
Wow. That's some inside baseball stuff right there. That's awesome. So, the reason that y'all decided on the theme of mysteries or unsolved or weird, or your show sort of runs the gamut of all of those things. Is it because of y'all's initial conversation about D.B. Cooper and y'all just decided to keep going with that? Like, how did y'all settle on your topic?
Yeah, mostly. I mean, when we first, obviously that wasn't what we talked about every time when we first met each other. It's just random conversations. And I had an idea of like, well, I'm listening to comedy podcasts, so we should do a comedy podcast, and that would be great. But I've listened to a lot of comedy shows come and go. They're kind of hard to sustain. And while I think I'm pretty funny, I was kind of doubting my ability to do something hilariously funny every week. And so when Devin said, well, why don't we just stick with this unsolved mystery stuff that we're talking about? Okay, well, what the heck? Let's give it a try. And it turned out it had a lot more leg to it than I would have ever expected.
How long was it before it caught fire and swept the nation?
About 2.5 or 3 years. I would say we had been doing it for at least 2 years before we really saw any significant bump in numbers.
What do you attribute that bump to?
So when we first started, there weren't that many shows that dealt with unsolved mysteries or true crime. It just wasn't a genre that it had really been tapped into. And we are friends with the guys over at Generation Y, Justin and Aaron. And then there's another podcast called Sword and Scale with Mike Boudet. And we all kind of started chatting with each other just a little bit by email and Twitter and all of that kind of stuff in the early days. And we figured it out later that they had kind of wisely tipped a little more towards the true crime angle, because if you know anything about the podcast world right now, it is just true crime crazy.
Yes, it is.
And the genre is just so swarmed right now. And so we kind of leaned a little bit that way. We didn't dive headfirst and become a true crime all the time, murder kind of show. But we started doing a little bit more of that, and that started to get us on more of the lists. I remember, what was the first list that we got mentioned on? And that was a bump, and it wasn't BuzzFeed. I can't remember, but I remember we were on a list on some major website at one point. It was like, oh my God, they noticed us. And then, of course, we started watching the numbers climb, and it's just took off from there.
Now, when they found you, did they just stumble upon you?
Most of them seem to have either found us on a list or just randomly found us in whatever player search function they had, because people who were after unsolved mysteries would type something like unsolved mystery, which, unsolved mysteries, that kind of stuff happens to be in our wheelhouse and in our tags and our description. So we would come up. And then they would jump in and they would either like us and continue to listen, or they wouldn't and they'd move on.
That is an excellent answer, and I appreciate that. But what I meant was the people who put you on lists. How did the list people find you?
Oh, the list people.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have absolutely no idea.
That's awesome. Let's call that an unsolved mystery.
There we go. Another mystery that we have not solved. 5 years on, and we haven't solved a damn thing.
Not a thing. So, do you have any favorite singular episode of all that time? Like, do you have one that is your ultimate favorite, whether it was because y'all really all vibed together well that day, or it was a particular story that you were excited about? Do you have a favorite?
You know, my favorites were always kind of evolving. There are stories that stuck out to me because of different details. Like, what is that terrible actor that did a movie? Okay, so there was John Holmes, and he was involved with a giant murder back in the 80s. And I cannot...
The Wonderland murders.
Yeah, Wonderland murders. That's the one. So I knew I was a kid growing up in the 80s. So I knew the name John Holmes, but I didn't really know anything about the guy. And so when this story got suggested, I remember looking and going, oh God, John Holmes is involved? This is just going to be, a big member story, and it's just going to focus on this porn star. And then once I dove in, it turned out to just be such a wild and weird story. And there's that Val Kilmer did a movie on it, which was okay, but it was watching that and then watching all the interviews with him that I really felt that one really stuck out, because it was insane. Absolutely insane what happened in that house, and the bad luck of the one gal that was there, and the good luck of her boyfriend for having bugged out for the night, because just everybody in that house was just brutally attacked. So that's
a pretty crazy one.
Yeah, it had this. It wasn't pop culture, but for me, it was just something from my childhood that I guess I kind of knew about in the back of my head, but I hadn't really filled it all out. So that one, I really like that one.
I think that was pop culture. It was definitely popular culture at the time. Maybe not for your generation, but it was definitely popular culture at the time. So I'll say it was pop culture.
All right, we'll go with that.
Thinking sideways. Well, my favorite, obviously I haven't listened to, what is that, 250 episodes? 300? Y'all, something crazy. 11 million? How many episodes did y'all do?
We have released 267 numbered episodes, and then we've got bonus content in there as well.
Nice. So obviously I haven't listened to all of that because I didn't find you that many years ago. I really only found you earlier this year through my daughter, who is a rabid fan. Oh, she would actually kill me if I didn't ask you to say hi to Sally Zabava. Will you do that for me?
I can do that. Hi, Sally.
Ooh, she's going to be excited. Thank you very much.
Well, hey, you know what? Save this bit of audio for her birthday. Or the next time. How old is your daughter?
26.
Oh, okay. Damn. I was going to say, if she's like the angsty teenager, you could say the next time she's all upset with you, you could just play that and, then you would be out of the doghouse.
Well, just because she's 26 doesn't mean she doesn't act like an angsty teenager. So maybe I'll take that and use it. Also, I would slap the shit out of her if she was a teenager and she was listening to your show.
I got to tell you, we didn't do it on purpose, but we ended up being one of the only true crime-ish shows out there that parents didn't mind listening to with their kids around. And I mean like their younger kids. I mean, we never swore on the show. If there was ever going to be grisly descriptions of violence, we would always give what we called a little ears warning. Most of our stuff was pretty light. We tried to keep it light because at times talking about people getting offed can be a pretty brutal topic.
Well, specifically, my favorite episode, there was I think it was a whole family got axe murdered in Iowa back in the early 1900s.
Oh, and, yeah.
Like Valiska or some Vasilic. I don't know. I can't remember what it is.
Yeah, the Valiska axe murders.
Yes, them. Well, specifically during that episode, there was, it was a whole family and even like some neighbor kids, but there was children who were, brutally killed, and there was some question about whether or not other things had happened to some of the female victims.
Uh-huh.
And
yep.
I think that all three of you just barely brushed on that just enough so that if you're paying attention, you know that was something that was questioned, but y'all didn't spend hardly any time on that, and y'all did not focus on that, and I really, really appreciated that. Just because I don't listen to stuff to make my stomach hurt, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I see what you're saying there.
Well, and that's the other thing is you got to remember, Steve, like where we knew about all of that and we would brush by it. But if you didn't know the story, you would kind of get a little bit of it. But we would spend so much time before recording, reading and researching that we were constantly just always wading hip deep through some things that you just really don't want to think about happening to another person. So that was one of the reasons we're like, nope, we don't need to throw that in somebody's face. We need to keep it kind of easy and kind of on the light side.
Well, I think that was part of the secret to your success. It was well played. Well played. So you mentioned the research. How much research went into, let's just say, each particular episode? And how did you divide up the research? Because it felt like it seemed like y'all all focused on different aspects of each case.
Yeah, so as you know, we would rotate who was the host on each week. So it would be myself, then Devin, then Joe, and then we'd start over again. And whoever picked the topic was responsible for doing the bulk of the research. So if it was my turn and we had a due date of let everybody know what story you're going to put out there, I would go do a bunch of research and make sure it was a story I wanted to talk about. And then what I would do is I would provide Devin and Joe with, a half a dozen to a dozen links for them to start researching the story on. I, as the host, would then continue to do as much research as possible. And I was also responsible for writing what we referred to as the script for that episode, which was really just an oversized essay. And that's really what we used to guide the story and make sure facts didn't get missed. And we told things in a logical order. So as the host of an episode, I would say I could easily spend between 20 and 40 hours in a given week researching the story. And then if it wasn't my turn to host, what the nice thing was about that is I'd read whatever information was provided, and then I could take off into any random or weird angles that I wanted to. And so that would kind of change how much time you spent on it. But I would say as a non-host, you would easily spend 10 to 20 hours a week reading about a story.
Interesting. And y'all would do this on the internet and also like the library, actual real books?
Yeah. So we all had our own MOs. Devin liked to stay primarily on the internet, but she also knows how to use the internet better than Joe and I because we're dumb. So she would find things on the internet we could never find. Joe was the kind of guy, he'll pick up the phone and call somebody. So if it's the local sheriff's department in some town, he'll call the sheriff's department, or he'll call a newspaper, the author. He would call that person and talk to the person at the newspaper. And then I liked to spend time at our local library. So I would go through the library and pick up whatever books I can and go through them to see whatever extra internet savvy information there was. Because the problem with the internet is that there is so much copy paste going on. You can search a topic and you will start seeing the exact same article blatantly copied and pasted from one website to the next. And that, of course, means that some details that are small or considered unimportant will disappear, whereas an author that's actually writing a book has an incentive to include every single detail they could. So I would head to the library and pick up books. I was actually able to get into the county library here locally and get into their rare book room and actually sit down with a book that was over 100 years old. John Audubon, the guy who started the Audubon Society, or who the Audubon Society is named after?
Yes.
Yeah. He wrote a book all about birds of this country. And I was able to go there and, I think they made me wear the gloves and I couldn't sweat on the book. I couldn't breathe on it barely. But I was able to look at a very old, nearly original copy of that book for research on a story that I was doing once. Birds of America, that was the name of the book.
Yeah, that was it. It's a very, very famous book. That's so cool. You got that you were afforded that luxury. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Remember when the movie Tombstone, when that first came out, which was like, I want to say like 95 or 94 or something like that?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
I fell in love with that movie because it was just, it bombed at the box office, but I was looking forward to it so much. And when it came out, I loved it. Oh my gosh. And I actually went to the local library here in San Antonio, one of them, and I wanted to find out how factual that movie was. And so I was doing all this research on the gunfight at the OK Corral, and the whole Tombstone, Arizona story. And two of the things that really surprised me was I thought that maybe it was a bit of artistic license where Doc Holliday says things like, I'm your Huckleberry or you're no Daisy or whatever.
Yeah.
In those old books that I found in the reference section, he's quoted as saying those things.
Really?
And it blew me away. But the thing that really freaked me out was there was a photo of, I don't remember if it was just Wyatt Earp or if it was Wyatt Earp and everybody else, but the black and white photo of Wyatt Earp looked exactly like Kurt Russell as Wyatt Earp.
That's hilarious.
I was floored. It was so weird.
Is that the one that Val Kilmer is in?
It is.
Okay, so that's 2 Val Kilmer movies in this episode already.
Ooh, let's see if we can do a Top Gun one later. No, I'm just kidding.
Danger Zone!
So y'all sort of split up the workload, and I think it's really, really fascinating that you all sort of had your own separate little research expertise niches. Devin surfing the dark web, even though that's not what she told you she was doing. And then you in the library, and then Joe just picking up the phone and being like, I'm just going to call these fools. Like, what's up?
Yeah, that was always so weird to me. Like, well, actually, I called the so-and-so. And I love Joe to death, but sometimes he would not tell you that he had done something like that. He would just say, hey, and this was something we did as a courtesy to each other. We'd say, hey, when you get to this part, I'm going to share something, so I don't want to throw you off track. Oh, okay, fine, whatever. But Joe would say, hey, I'm going to share something. And then he would just, I talked to the local coroner. And you're like, what? You called the coroner's office? How did you even get him to talk to you?
Like that is a skill. That is an absolute skill. Oh, so speaking of phones, because he would just pick up the phone and call people. That Iowa axe murder case thing. Y'all had, I guess, sort of speculated, or y'all had questioned how, I guess it was the neighbor lady or whatever was supposed to go get the cop. Because, like, the brother came and was like, oh, no, go call the cop or whatever. Call Henry Horton or whatever his name is. And so y'all were like, well, how did she do that? We're assuming by phone. I mean, he might have lived 2 doors down, but let's just assume she picked up the phone. I was curious, did anybody look to see if that town even had phones in 1910? I mean, it was a super small town in Iowa.
I don't know. And I can tell you that that's the kind of thing that we would have things like that pop up in conversation because you always think, well, I'm going to be as prepared as possible. And then the thing that you don't even think is going to show up in the conversation would show up. And then you look like a doofus because you don't know the answer. So to this day, I don't know, because sometimes the problem with having a weekly show is we would get feedback and people would start asking us questions. But of course, we didn't have time to then go digging into those questions because we had another story due.
Correct.
And that was compounded by the fact that we always had a healthy backlog of unreleased episodes. So we were always recording 3 weeks in advance of an episode dropping, because the edit process for us it took a while. And then we would always review the episodes to make sure that A, they sounded right, and B, there wasn't any content in there that wasn't supposed to be. I was doing all the editing, so I was trying to be super, super careful, but you can't hit it out of the park every time. So we would have this backlog of, X episode drops, but we're now 3 weeks into the future. And so when somebody would write in about a story, it's now been a month gone for us. So it would make it even harder to then try and put yourself back in that frame of reference and then try and dive back into that story. And so things like that, unfortunately, kind of did tend to fall to the wayside for us.
Well,
we needed a better intern.
yeah, you did. Well, I mean, as far as the backlog, boy, do I feel you. When I first started this, I was releasing one every other week. And then after 6 months, I had such a huge backlog that I decided to go every week. Mm-hmm. And then after 6 months, I had such a huge backlog that now I'm releasing twice a week.
Oh, wow.
And I still have a massive backlog, and I'm not really sure what to do about it. So I guess that's a good problem to have.
Oh, definitely.
But I love the way you explain that, so that everybody who's listening and wondering why you never answered their question can have an answer.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, there was something, I just listened to your conversation with Ed Asner, who, by the way, is a freaking gem. But
oh my gosh, that was one of my favorites. I was so excited when I got off the phone. I was like, sweetheart, he called me an idiot like 3 times.
I know. Well, that was the thing. You know what? And I think that was one of your first episodes I'd listened to. And so I kind of came in cold. I didn't know what to expect from you or the interaction with your guest. And he had this little fake wall up for, I'd say, about the first 5 or 10 minutes before he finally warmed up and started having fun. I was just like, God, this guy is such a cranky old cuss. I don't know if I want to wait, what? Okay, now he's in his game. This is going to be so good.
It was by far one of the most amazing times, because I was so nervous leading up to it, because obviously he's a Hollywood icon, but he does have a reputation for being a pretty grouchy fella. And I had heard him on the Adam Carolla show a couple of years ago, and that, just hearing him on that episode, I guess I was prepared for the worst. And so I was expecting, if I was even going to get to talk to Ed, I was expecting him to, call me some names and hang up on me in the first 5 minutes. And so I was super nervous. And I think that you could sort of tell it when I was listening to it with my wife. We took a road trip and she finally got to hear it. And I could, listening to myself, I could tell that I was so nervous in the first few minutes. But then, like you said, he kind of warmed up, and, we kind of, I guess we warmed each other up, which sounds a little weird, but, but then I started thinking about it because somebody was asking me about, how that works, because they do a podcast, but they don't really interview people, and they were going to do an interview. And so they were kind of a little nervous about it. And so I really started thinking about it. And I think that a good lot, because for the most part, I've never met anybody that I'm interviewing, for the most part. And so, it's just a cold get to know you process, and that can be kind of uncomfortable for both people. And so I think that on almost all of my shows, there is that little cold, that first few cold minutes. And then I feel like it warms up into a kind of a comfortable conversation after that. So, yeah,
well, it's always hard when you're talking to somebody that is kind of on that idol level. We did an interview with Mark Adams, the author. So he wrote Meet Me in Machu Picchu, or it's Meet Me in Atlantis. And oh God, what is his? He wrote a Machu Picchu book, and I can't remember if it's Turn Left or Turn Right at Machu Picchu. But he is a well-known travel writer. And he has been on our bookshelf for years. And we talked to him about the Atlantis story because of all the stuff he was doing. And it was the same thing in the beginning. I was like, oh, wow, I don't know what to say to this guy. It's so scary. And he was just such a gracious guy and so easy to talk to. He was just so nice that it felt natural. But it's really tough when you kind of idolize these people.
Yeah, you're not wrong. But it's a lot of fun, though, right? I mean, especially once you get into it, the experience is just amazing.
Oh, yeah. I talked to, we did an episode on The Shining, and, because there's all these conspiracy theories about the movie The Shining. And I was doing research on it, and we knew a guy who was in Hollywood, and we were talking to him, and I was like, oh yeah, you're going to love it. We're going to do a Shining episode. And he says, you're what? Oh my God, you've got to talk to Brian Cook. And I'm like, who's Brian Cook? I don't know who this guy is. Well, it turns out he was one of Kubrick's main guys, and he was, I think, God, was he executive producer on The Shining? But he had worked with Stanley Kubrick for years.
Wow.
And so suddenly I got to talk to this Hollywood legend. And luckily for the listeners, most of that episode got cut out because it was kind of the opposite of where it was just warm and easy. That one probably took 45 minutes before it eventually warmed up and we got audio that I could use in the episode.
That's crazy.
I don't know what his deal was. He's like, hey, so I know you want to talk about Stanley, and I've done all this writing about Stanley in this memoir that I've got. So let me read to you about Stanley. And I don't know what to say. This is like 2 minutes. Okay, Mr. Cook. Oh, you want to call you Brian? Okay, Brian. Sure, no problem. And then he's like, I kid you not, I had a headset mic on. I was sitting in my house on my couch recording, and he was going, and it was early in the morning, and I had been drinking coffee all morning, and I had to go. And so I put the headset down, went and took a leak, and came back, and he never knew I was gone.
That is awesome. Well, he knows now. Say hello, Brian.
Yep. Sorry, buddy.
So Thinking Sideways has stopped producing new content. Is that right?
That is correct.
Again, you don't have to answer anything you don't want to, but is there a reason?
Yeah. I'm Yoko Ono.
Really?
Yeah.
You killed John Lennon?
I did. Wait, no. Yoko didn't kill John Lennon. She just broke up the Beatles, dude.
Google it. Google that shit.
What happened is that back in March, my wife and I had taken a vacation.
Is it a new wife? I heard you're recently married.
I got married. I bought my anniversary card. Anniversary is next week, so that'll be 3 years that we've been married now.
Okay, gotcha.
But we took a vacation, and we ended up going to Southeast Asia, and so we spent about 10 days in Vietnam and then 10 days in Cambodia. And Joe and Devin and I had said, well, we can't stop release. People can't know that. So we pushed really hard, recorded a whole bunch of content ahead of time so that the podcast kept releasing while I was gone. But we got there and we both loved it there. And I don't know if you've ever been to Southeast Asia, but the people are amazing and it's an absolutely beautiful part of the world. And I was just like, man, I would like to have an adventure, and I think I want to live here for a while. And my wife laughed at me at first and said, you're crazy, whatever. I mean, I've lived in Southeast Asia before, but that was a long time ago. And I'm like, no, honey, I'm serious. Like, I think we should move here. I think this could be really awesome. And there was a whole series of events that fell into place after that, but I'm moving to Southeast Asia. I will be in Hanoi in 30 days from the day that you and I are recording this.
Wow. Are you going to be able to continue working, or are you quitting your job?
So probably both. I will be able to continue to work for the company I'm working for now for a while. They have a kind of antiquated policy on remote employees. Because, I mean, let's be honest, what I do, I'm a digital designer. Everything I deliver is files anyway, but whatever. So I will work for them for a while, and then once they decide that they no longer need my services, I will just start doing freelance design for a living. I've done it before, and the internet makes it super easy. It doesn't matter where my butt is sitting, whether it's in the house I'm in right now or in a cafe in northern Hanoi. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, and I think that your podcasting career has proven that time and time again, because people all over the planet have heard your stories.
Yeah.
So the internet is a miraculous thing. Well done. Is your wife going to work over there?
Yeah. She, so my wife has lived in Southeast Asia before, and she's certified to teach English. So she's going to pick up a gig being an English teacher while we're there.
That is awesome. Do you guys have any, is there an end date? Like, do you know how long you're going to be there, or it's just until the next thing happens?
We committed to a year. So we said, listen, if we're going to do this, let's do it for at least a year. So we go through all the seasons. And then if at the end of the year we say, well, Steve, that was your midlife crisis because it all went down in flames, then we'll come home. Or...
That is awesome.
Or, if we say, hey, I love it here, let's stay on another year, but let's move somewhere else in the region, then, we'll go somewhere else in the region.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So is Thinking Sideways, is it over, or are we going to call it a hiatus? How are y'all ending it?
We're calling it over because the problem is that the internet connection between here and Southeast Asia is not reliable. And while we could record a conversation on both ends, just like you and I are doing today, it doesn't work if you can't actually connect to one another. And so that's a difficulty. And the other issue is that it's 14 hours ahead of where we are based here on the West Coast.
Oh,
so
wow.
We're calling it done.
Sure.
Maybe someday in the future we'll release a reunion episode.
Gotcha.
I don't know. I know Joe and Devin in the interim have plans to make new shows. Devin is working on a project or two that aren't mystery based, and Joe's kind of taking his time to figure out what it is that he wants to do on a weekly or semi-weekly basis.
Gotcha. So let me ask you this, Yoko. When Yoko broke up the Beatles, some of them weren't friends for a while. Are you guys all still friends?
Oh, yeah, totally.
Oh, good.
Listen, we're like family. You know how it is with family. 1 week you love them. The next week you want to drown them in a bucket of bleach.
Yeah.
It's family. It's like, oh, you're driving me crazy this week, and then next week you're rushing to their defense because somebody on the internet is being a douchebag. I mean, we don't hate each other, and I don't foresee us, going out of our way to avoid each other or anything weird like that. I mean, it's kind of a break. I don't know. That's the only way I can think to explain it. Is it's just. We're going to talk on the internet now and again because I'm moving away to college.
Well, I think that's a really good approach. You guys should all get together and listen to Casey Musgrave's song. I think it's called Family is Family. It's a really good song. You just read the words. No, listen to the whole song. It's great. You'll dig it.
Okay, I'll do that.
You'll dig it. Yeah, it's great. So only a couple more things before I let you go, because I know it's late and we've been going on for a while, and I really appreciate your time, Steve. First, can you tell everybody your social media tags so that they can reach out and say hello and maybe keep tabs on you while you're across the world?
Absolutely. So I am available on Instagram and on Twitter. My Instagram is How Steve Sees the World, and on Twitter I'm at How Steve Sees. Currently my Twitter feed is basically just a replication of my Instagram feed, because what I have found in the last 6 months is I've picked up my camera again. And so I'm just kind of throwing out all the photos that I'm shooting. That's what somebody was talking about recently, is that my Instagram is nothing but the Southeast Asia and then a couple of pictures from, somewhere in the Pacific Northwest. But I have started trying to figure out how to use Twitter. The tweeting thing is kind of confusing. I feel like an old man every time I use it.
You and me both, except I really am an old man. Somebody told me that you were super into photography, and so it's good to hear that you've picked up your camera again.
Yeah, I don't know why I don't know why I put it down. I blame the bank. I really do think it's the bank's fault.
Well, after working in a bank for so long, that it will suck the life out of you. I mean, it will absolutely suck all of the energy, all of the drive, all of the joy.
Yeah.
So I would 100% blame it on.
There we go. I will do that. But no, I thank my wife, because I had said for a while, God, I want to start shooting again. And I finally got up the gumption and said, listen, I'm going to go out and I need to replace the camera I've got right now. So I went and got a new DSLR. And she said, well, how about this for Christmas? And she got me a class at a local community college for a couple of weeks. I guess it was almost 3 months. And so it was a great refresher to just be able to sit down and shoot and critique and figure out how to do it. And I was just like, oh God, this is what I like so much about it.
That's really cool to hear.
Yeah.
And it's just in time, because you're about to go and be excited all over again about everything you're about to see. So that's really cool, man.
Oh yeah, I can't wait to get into, to sit in cafes in Hanoi and just do street photography for a while, because there's just so much crazy stuff going on.
I bet. That's real. I'm happy for you, man. That's cool.
Thanks.
So I think that y'all should do a show before you leave, just one, and then hold on to it for a few months and then let it go. And I think that it should be centered around, there was a series of murders that I don't think you guys covered. For 12 years, between 1984 and 1996, there was 264 murders in a small town in Maine, and you guys never even addressed it.
Really?
Yeah.
Is this from a Stephen King novel?
That would be ridiculous, Steve. I get that it's because it's in Maine, and so you're like, oh, it must be Stephen King. Don't be foolish. It was in a small town called Cabot Cove.
Oh, okay. Wait a minute. I swear I know that one.
Jessica Fletcher? Murder, She Wrote?
That's all she wrote. We've got a couple of episodes, so I know that this will probably come out after the fact. But we had a bunch of bonus content that we had only been releasing to premium stream that we had available. So we're gonna go outright, and we are releasing all of that stuff over the next couple of weeks. And then our very, very final episode is us at our best, and it's our bloopers episode.
Oh, how cool is that?
Yeah, you get to hear us sound like complete and total doofuses.
Oh, that is awesome. That's going to be exciting stuff.
Yeah.
So that's at the premium level, or is that going to be at the regular level?
Oh, it's at the regular level. We've shut down the premium feed, and the stuff that's coming out now was stuff that had been behind that premium paywall before.
Gotcha.
We say, well, since we're done, let's just give everybody every single thing that we did. So we're just letting it all go.
Fantastic. And y'all did some cons or whatever, right?
Yeah, we went to CrimeCon 2 years in a row.
Good.
CrimeCon was awesome.
Was it?
Yeah, I loved CrimeCon because we got to meet so many people. This is the funniest thing in the world is we get to go to a con and we get to meet people and we're standing there behind, some stupid 3x6 table, and you would see somebody walk by while we were talking to each other or somebody else, and you could just see the antennas go up and they would turn and look at you because they recognized your voice and they would be staring at you.
That's right. Nobody knows what y'all look like.
Yeah, they're like, wait.
And everybody knows your voice.
What? Who? Oh my! And it was always like, oh my God! But the listeners and the fans were so great. It was great to meet those people.
Very cool. So as we're heading out, I want to wish you a happy anniversary, Steve.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And is there anything that I didn't ask or didn't bring up that you wanted to talk about?
The only thing that I can ever think of is that I would like to say this is kind of a PSA for all of my brethren in the podcasting world, and this is for listeners, is to remember that the people who make podcasts are also people as well. It's so funny how people just kind of, because something's on the internet, that window of anonymity, opens up and they just become whoever they want to be. But, I don't know if you've ever experienced this. I mean, I didn't see any negative reviews for you, which is fantastic, but, somebody's got to read that someday. And I just wish that people who are going to listen to these shows and make comments always remember that the person you're talking about is still an actual person.
I think that is a wonderful, wonderful message to go out on, and I will cap it with this small story. I was in Louisville, Kentucky, 5 years ago, and I went to go see a band that I was very excited about, and it was a very small venue, and I was there to actually see the headliner, and so the opening band, I was not having a good time during the opening band, so I opened up my Twitter machine and I started tweeting about how much fun I was not having listening to this band. And lo and behold, that band liked that tweet. And then I was mortified. I felt so bad. I almost cried. I felt terrible. And then I sat there not even enjoying the headliner, which was the reason I went, because I was in my head saying, you just did that to somebody. Like, I don't know how many of that band read that tweet, but somebody did. And that was a shitty thing to do, Steve. And so I really try and refrain from doing any shit like that, because that interaction blew me away. So I understand 100% what you're saying.
Yeah.
And sadly, I'm guilty of it as well in the past. So thank you for that PSA.
Well, and that band was smart enough to realize that it's you kill them with kindness. Sometimes you just can't fire back. You just got to smile and be nice to them. Every now and again, you got to tell them to piss off. But usually it's just being nice right back, and it takes all the wind out of their sails.
Well, they probably weren't having a good day anyway, because almost nobody showed up to that venue. And so, it was just compounded dickery on my part. And...
I'm stealing that phrase.
You can have that. Take it to Hanoi. And if they wanted to, they could have found me, because literally there was probably 25 people there. They could have found me if they wanted to. But that was just a really shitty thing to do. So all you kids and old people out there, don't be shitty on the internet. There's enough of that going on.
Yeah. Be nice to people.
Be nice to people. Steve, Thinking Sideways is your last name. Thank you so very much for hanging out on Fascination Street. I'm very, very excited, and I just can't thank you enough, man. I hope you have a great, great time in Hanoi, and I hope you take all of the pictures and keep putting them on the internet.
Thanks, Steve. I appreciate you having me on. This has been a boatload of fun, and to boot, I now have a new show in my stable, so it's a win-win all the way around.
Thank you so much, man. I appreciate it.
All right, buddy. Thanks a lot.
I'll talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye. Opening music is the song Magnolia from the 2014 album Intransigence, used with permission from Douglas Miles Clark. Closing music is Apollo from the 2001 album Into the Known by the band Sapphire. Thanks for hanging out with us and getting to know a little bit about our guest. We'll see you next time on Fascination Street.